Okay, so today we are going to finish up Chapter 5. We're going to cover solving equations by factoring. So our beginning part of these problems are going to be the same. We're going to factor them. Once we get our factors, then we're going to set the factors equal to 0 so we can make an equation to find out what x equals. In this lesson, to solve these, we're going to apply this zero product property. And all this says is that for any real numbers a and b, if a times b equals 0, if and only if either a is equal to 0 or b equals 0. So essentially they're saying that if you were to multiply two numbers, let's say a equals 4 and b equals 0, they're just saying that as long as one of these numbers is a 0, then you can get a 0 as your answer. So that's what this product property is showing you. But by applying this and setting the factors equal to 0, we can figure out what x equals. So for example, in example 1, my problem is already factored. So my problem is already factored for me. All I need to do now is apply the zero product property, and I'm going to set each one of my factors equal to 0. And now I have two simple addition and subtraction problems to solve for x. So here I will apply the subtraction property of equality, subtract 2 from both sides. Over here I'll add 5. And my two answers for x, when it says to solve, are going to be x equals -2 and x equals 5. When you're doing this on the test, you can leave your answer like that, or you can also put them in the set brackets. Either way. Now notice my next example. It's already been factored for me. So again, I'm going to apply that zero product property. And I'm going to take each one of my factors and set them equal to 0. So first I'll do 5n equals 0, then n minus 3 equals 0, and then n minus 4 equals 0. I will solve each one of these. So I will divide by 5. 0 divided by 5 is just 0. Add 3. N equals 3. Add 4, and n equals 4. So for here, my solution, you can either leave them like that, or you can put them in the set brackets. Either way of writing it is fine. Any questions? Okay, let's try another one. Everybody good so far? So when it's already factored for you, it's easy. You just set it equal to 0 and you're going to solve. Try the next example here. So remember, way back at the beginning of the year, we had polynomial equations. So these are just, I guess, some vocabulary words here. And usually polynomial equations are named by their highest degree. So you should always put them in order from greatest to least. So when the biggest exponent is a 1, this would be a linear equation. When the biggest exponent is a 2, it's a quadratic equation. And when the largest degree or exponent is a 3, it's a cubic. You should always put it in standard form, so from greatest to least. Okay, so now here's example 3. This time it is not factored for us. So now we got to go back to what we learned at the beginning of chapter 5, and I need to factor this. However, before I can factor it, I need to put it in standard form. So what I need to do is put it in order from greatest to least of exponents. So I'm going to put the 2x squared first. It's already there. The 5x is there. But then I need to minus the 12 because I need to set my equation equal to 0 so I can solve, so I could factor and then solve. So now I need to factor the left side. So this is what we've been doing all along. So here's where I'm going to multiply the first and the last. I'm getting negative 24 x squared. So I'm looking for factors of negative 24. That will give me 5. So I could start my list. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Now remember, I'm trying to make a negative 24, so my signs need to be different. And the way that I can tell which number gets which sign, I look at the middle term. See how it's positive? So this tells me my bigger factor is going to be the positive. So I'm going to put negatives on all these smaller ones. So now I have to look to see which one of these combinations will give me positive 5 when I add them. Notice this one gives me 23, this one gives me 10, and here's the one that works. Negative 3, positive 8. So now I'm going to factor it. I rewrite the first term. I put in the negative 3x, put in the 8x, and then write the 12. Now I factor by grouping. So all this part isn't anything new. The new part of this lesson is once we factor it, setting it equal to 0. So my greatest common factor of my first group is going to be x, 2x minus 3. My greatest common factor of my second group is going to be 4. Then I'll divide. Notice again, when you factor by grouping, these two things need to look the same. So then I take the x plus 4, put it together, and then rewrite one of the 2x minus 3's. Now again, remember, all of this was set equal to 0. So now to find, after I factored it, I set each factor equal to 0. So now I do x plus 4 equals 0, 2x minus 3 equals 0, subtract 4, x equals negative 4, add 3, 2x equals 3, divide by 2, and x equals 3 over 2. So my two solutions here are going to be 3 over 2 and negative 4. And again, the order doesn't matter how you write it. Yes?
You also write 1 1/2?
Yes. So you can also make it a mixed number. If you'd rather change the 3 over 2 to 1 1/2, that is fine. Let's try another one. Again, we're going to factor this thing first. So this is example 4. First thing I should do is write it in standard form. So I'm going to put the 18y to the third, then the 24y squared, then I'm going to write the 8y and set it equal to 0. So the first thing I should always look for is a greatest common factor. My greatest common factor here is going to be 2y. I'm going to divide all three terms by 2y. So 2y outside, and now I divide 9y squared plus 12y plus 4 equals 0. Now I need to look to see if I can factor that trinomial I've gotten. Notice, to me, I see the ends. It looks like they're perfect squares. So I'm going to double check to see if this is a perfect square trinomial. So when I go to do this, if I square root the 9, I get 3y. If I square root the 4, I get 2. Remember, if it's a perfect square trinomial, it should produce a binomial squared. So remember, to get the middle term, you would multiply 3y times 2 times 2. So that does give me 12y. This is a perfect square trinomial. So this is the correct factoring. Don't forget about your greatest common factor. It needs to go out front. So now what I need to do is set each of my factors equal to 0. Now, technically, this 3y plus 2 counts for 2 answers, but I only need to show the work one time. So I would subtract 2 here. 3y equals negative 2. Divide by 3, and y equals negative 2/3. I need to solve this one. Divide by 2, and y equals 0. Now, what you're going to be learning later on in Algebra 2 is the degree on this will tell you how many solutions you should be looking for. Now, remember this negative 2/3 here, this is counting for 2. So I have 2 here, and then 1 at the y equals 0. So I did find all 3 of my solutions. Again, you can write it in the set brackets, or just leave it as the variable equals. So these are my solutions for example 4. Now, let me go ahead and do a couple from the homework. I know you're doing, I believe, evens. So I'm going to do a couple of the odds just to give you a little idea here. So let me go ahead and do number 29. So 2 through 42 even. So on number 29, let me add a blank page here, is the evens. This is 29, just to give you an idea of what's going on. So it's written backwards. So even though the 0 is in the front, we can rearrange it and put it behind it. And now we need to begin our factoring process. At first glance, you see, oh, it's a binomial. Is it the difference of 2 squares? No, it's not. However, what we could do here is factor out a greatest common factor. So my greatest common factor here is going to be 2y squared. I will divide both of them by the greatest common factor. And now I would set each of my factors equal to 0 and then solve. So 2y squared equals 0 and 2y minus 1 equals 0. Divide by 2. Y squared equals 0. And then technically what we should do here is square root this, but square root of 0 is just 0. Over here, add 1, divide by 2, and my other solution is 1/2. So again, my original degree was a 3, the largest. So again, this is telling me I should get 3 answers. But remember, this y squared, this y equals 0 counts for 2. So my answer here is just 0 and 1/2. So this is the homework. The beginning part, they're factored for you. Then later on into the homework, so you're going to have to factor it and then set the factors equal to 0. So homework again.